Yo, what is up, guys? Snap here. Today we're going to be talking about the brand new group carry that we're going to be bringing into the 324 Necropolis League. And oh boy, do we have a big one for you here today. The build itself is, of course, BAMA. If you've been watching my stream lately, I've been talking a little bit about it, kind of, messing around with the POE. I think we finally landed on a setup that we really like here, so I'm going to go over all of it today. As you can see, we have a little bit of damage with a single target setup. It's about 13 billion damage with all party buffs up and activated. And yeah, the damage of this build is just through the roof. So first, let's talk a little bit about BAMA and what it is, the mechanics, and all of that stuff. So first off, if you're unfamiliar, BAMA is simply blink arrow and mirror arrow of one of prismatic and one of bombarding clones. You have to use both blink arrow and mirror arrow because blink arrow and mirror arrow share cooldowns. And so you're incentivized to use two different skills, one being blink arrow and one being mirror arrow, so that you can get half the cooldown essentially because you're able to use two different skills. Additionally, you are incentivized to use one prismatic clones and one bombarding clones because if you read the skill gem here, there is a maximum of 3 clones that fire arrows upwards on bombarding clones, and on prismatic clones here you can see that we have a maximum of 3 clones that fire elemental arrows. This makes it so that you have 2 different caps of 3 for a total of 6 clones. So you can have 6 total clones if you use the 2 different gems, and you can have basically half the cooldown if you use one mirror arrow and one blink arrow. You can kind of choose which direction you want to take it. You can have the bombarding be blink arrow and the prismatic be mirror arrow, but I think at the end of the day it doesn't matter that much. Just know that you have the flexibility if you want to. As for the skill itself, it has insane targeting range. As you can see, if I spawn a blink arrow all the way over here, it is going to be firing basically off screen. Like if I'm here, this thing is firing well off screen to go, attack Kaduku. I can't even see it when I'm at his position. So the targeting range of these clones is actually very high, which makes the minion AI also extremely good. They don't move around at all, which means they never stop attacking. Additionally, as you can see here, the base duration is a whopping 20 seconds, which kind of lasts forever. You can scale this super easily to be like 50 seconds or something like that if you want to. So those are kind of the basics of this skill. And the question is, how do we deal so much damage? Well, if you've watched our previous group play video in Affliction, you kind of know the direction we're taking, and that is going to be minions. And the reason for this is because of Wind Ripper. Really quickly going over the reasons why we're going minions. When you're group playing, you want to get as much quantity and rarity as possible because you're playing a color, and that means you want to use an item called Wind Ripper because it is the highest quant and rarity available to you. There is a problem, however, in that the only way to do a culling setup is you have to use Southbound, and Southbound makes it so you basically cannot be freezing in the party because the line that you care about is your hits can only kill frozen enemies. This, however, is conflicting with Wind Ripper because in order to benefit from the quantity, the enemies have to be frozen, so these items are incompatible in a party. There is, however, one more way to leave mobs on 1 HP, and that is, of course, Speaker's Wreath, and this makes it so your minions' hits can only kill ignited enemies. And so last League in Affliction, we took our first venture into the minion group play carries, and we started out doing Hydra. And Hydras are pretty good, but they're not anywhere close to the amount of damage that this build can put out. So first off, let's start talking about the tree on this particular build. The tree is going to look very similar to a lot of other minion builds, especially in group play, in that it's going to have a huge reliance on cluster jewels, especially the large 12 passive ones here. That is where you're going to get the majority of your damage. The reason why is you can get a large amount of minion attack speed as well as generic increased damage, especially when you roll these with 25 effect. It also lets you hit some attributes like dex or strength. It also helps get res when you hit the suffixes. So these jewels are going to be basically the biggest bang for your buck, and you really need to make sure that these jewels are very good. This provides a substantial portion of your increased damage, and then it also gives you a lot of jewel socket. You're going to be using 3 of these exact setups, and you don't quite have enough points on the tree to take these last 3 points here, but just know that if you want to take more damage and cut some ES, you do have the option to take this damage down here if you want to. All 3 of these jewels are going to be the same. You want some combination of dex, res, all attributes, something like that as for the suffixes. Additionally, if you can get it, you can try and get energy shield on the prefix, but I have not put it here in this POB because I've tried to, have like a mid-tier level of gear and nothing crazy here. The other big thing here is we have a big boy timeless jewel in this setup. Now, this is the current best in slot setup, which is 5 passives here in the witch socket, but obviously this is like a dream item. Most likely you're going to be getting 3 slumlords or 4, depending on the type that you're getting. And we are opting to go for a strangle grasp in the build, and that just helps you kind of anoint the notables, which makes your timeless jewel a little bit easier to obtain. And you're going to path to 1 or 2 of the notables and then use a strangle grasp to anoint the other node or 2 if you have it. Past that, you're just grabbing some energy shield here. You're getting a lot of suppression from this one wheel wonder over here. You're getting more ES down here, some ES down here, and then you have your last cluster down here. It's all pretty straightforward. It's basically just 3 large cluster jewels with some extra fluff added to it with a GG timeless jewel. And that's kind of the basics of the tree. And let's move on on to the stuff that's actually really interesting, and that's going to be the gearing. The bow we are actually choosing to use here is going to be Lionized Glare. There's a couple reasons for that, and the main reason is honestly Far Shot. If you're unaware, Far Shot is really fucking OP, and it is currently the only way to give it to your minions. It's going to be on this bow here. Additionally, it helps solve your accuracy problems that you might have or otherwise have to invest into because it has hits can't be evaded. And then additionally, I have type tier socketed gems deal 25% more damage, and this is to simulate the prismatic clones buff that we received on the patch notes, which is dealing 25% more damage at all skill levels. And I've just put it on the bow here because it's the most convenient spot to put it. Now, going on a little bit more about Far Shot here, this is a graph that you can find on the POE wiki, and this is basically a graph of the multipliers that you can receive from Far Shot and or point blank depending on the various distances here. Now, at max distance, which is 75 meters here, you're going to be receiving the maximum bonus to the multiplier, which is going to be 1.6, which is a 60% more multiplier. 70 or 75 units looks something like this. If this is your character in the middle, it's going to be around here to the edge of your screen. So it's actually not that hard to hit the bonus here. Basically, if you're just hitting stuff that's kind of off screen, you're going to be getting like an insane more multiplier to all of your stuff. And because the minions target from so far away, this buff is super easy to proc, especially if you just kind of place your minions towards the edge of the screen and you get the big more multiplier because of it. One thing to mention here is in this POB, I have 2 weapon sets. And the reason for that is because there is a very good single target DPS setup you can use on a weapon swap, and you can have a clear setup on a different weapon swap. So when you come up to a tanky rare or like a Kostas or something like that, or you're fighting bosses, you can simply just weapon swap to a different setup of gem links, and it basically can give you over 3 or even 5 billion DPS here, just simply swapping the gems into an actual proper DPS setup. You can do this while inside of the map if you'd like, and all you have to do is basically weapon swap and then cast the mirror arrow of prismatic clones, and this is giving you like a 50% increase to your overall damage. You do, however, have to buy a second Lionized Glare, of course, and then also you need another quiver, but this quiver isn't very good. It just has some attack speed multi and flat, and then it has crafted frenzy charge on crit. This is very, very doable. This is maybe like a divine, if that. It's probably way less than that. This thing is trash. Of course, we need Speaker's Wreath so that the minions hits can only kill ignited enemies. This is very, very important. And one of the big uniques here that we're going to be adding is going to be Flesh Crafter. Now, Flesh Crafter, the motivation for this is that while your minions have energy shield, their hits ignore monster elemental resistances. Now, this has the Inquisitor effect, and this is actually very good, and I think that this effect is honestly super underrated. The reason for that is in Affliction, we actually had a very like juiced up curse bot with a lot of curse effect, and we also had exposure with extra effect, and we had like we just had so many ways to reduce the resistances, and some of those mobs with the altars are just not going below negative resistances, even with all of the party buffs up. And so I think we have opted to go for a resistance ignoring setup, and then that way we can invest into different things in the curse bot that aren't just penetration curses, and overall that opportunity cost is so big that I think it makes Flesh Crafter a very, very attractive choice here. It's also a very easy unique to get a +1 on. Gem levels are very good here. It does, increase the DPS quite a bit. And it also makes all of your minions have energy shield instead of life, which means that they can all benefit from Vaal Discipline, which all of your party is running. So the clones are getting a fair amount of energy shield. Triad's Grip is a no-brainer here. We want to convert all of the fizz damage that the clones are doing to cold so that we can benefit from hatred. So, a Triad's Grip with 4 green sockets and then whatever implicit you can get. Energy shield is good. Attack speed maybe is good. There's a lot of stuff you can get here, but I think ES is best. As for the boots, we're going to be using a Dream Quest Slippers. The CDR here is going to be very important on the implicit because obviously our main DPS skill is a cooldown, and we want to be able to summon the clones as fast as possible, especially if we're on the move a lot. Separate from that, as for the actual explicits or the affixes, it's just kind of like you just want a little bit of res and a little bit of ES, and you can craft some movement speed. This should be very easy to make. It's a very, very entry level pair of boots we have on here. Already talked about the Strangle Grasp. We are currently anointing duration and flask charges. I'll get to that in a little bit. And then obviously we're reserving 1 or maybe 2 of the anoints here to get a Slumlord if we can. And so it's a very flexible amulet, and it lets us basically get whatever timeless jewel might pop up. And it makes us very flexible in that regard because we could potentially be anointing stuff that's like way up here. And overall, it just makes the timeless jewel a lot easier to buy because, as you know, timeless jewels can be pretty annoying to buy, especially super early league. Moving on to the rings here, they're just Crusader ES rings with whatever resistances you can get. And then also you're going to want to try and get as much dexterity as possible. This build does have a very high dex requirement of 212. So getting these dex, here on the rings is going to be very important. And then whatever resistances you can cobble together is kind of what you want to go for here. They also do need to be unset rings. This build is quite socket starved if you want to fit in all of the extra utility and stuff stuff like that. So I think unsets are definitely the way to go here. And then last but not least, as for the normal gear, it's going to be the Mother's Embrace. Now, Mother's Embrace makes it so whenever your minions spawn, they chug all of your flasks. And now this is very OP. If you can take a quick look at the tooltip, it is currently 50% of the damage. Umbilicus Immortalis, if you remember our video from last league, in that you can actually put enkindling orbs with effect on these flasks. And because the flasks aren't ever applying to you, you can actually still gain charges of the flask while your minion has chugged it, which means that your minions can get super juiced, high effect, powerful flasks like Taste of Hate, Bottled Faith, as well as, you know, a Diamond Flask. This interaction is very OP, and yeah, it is basically one of the reasons why the damage can go so high is because you can basically give them like juiced up Mage Blood flasks, and you can still get charges back while they're active. As for the flasks themselves, we've opted for a Diamond Flask with a crit suffix because we do need to get crit cap. This is the primary way the minions get a lot of crit chances from the Diamond Flask. Taste of Hate, obviously, to get a little bit of gain. Fizz has extra cold. It's just for the hatred scaling. It's a very good choice. Dying Sun will add projectiles to the prismatic clone that's shooting the horizontal arrows, which is very good. And it also adds a little bit of AoE to the Rain of Arrows projectiles. So it will give you a little bit more coverage in that regard. It's honestly just the best flask to put in this slot. Besides the other 4 flasks, there isn't much else to put on. You're unable to use it Ziri's Promise because of the Flesh Crafter. If you use any amount of Chaos Res on the minions, they're just going to die. So you're just kind of out of options, and Dying Sun is probably the best option here. A Silver Flask to give them a very juiced up onslaught as well as extra attack speed. And then of course, Bottled Faith is just broken. I'm sure you know, it's just a lot of crit, ton of increased damage taken. Very good flask. It is 22% of the total damage of the build. A few things about the jewels here. Obviously, I talked about the cluster jewels, and it's just cluster jewel. You can fill the rest of the other sockets with Ghastly Eye jewels that look something like this. High amounts of attack and cast speed, as much flat fizz as you can get, and then obviously whatever energy shield you can get. These can be all Auged Regal just for these 3 affixes, but it is going to take you like, you know, maybe 500 to a couple thousand alts to, you know, roll a couple of these. It's not the easiest, but it's definitely something you can obtain, especially if you compromise on like the flat fizz tiers. You want to put in 1 Fortress Covenant just for that increased 45% damage. It's very good bang for your buck here. Additionally, you do need to socket 1 combat focus because the prismatic clones are doing Ellie hit, which is fire, cold, and lightning, and you want to specifically block fire because if the mobs will be doing fire damage, then they will be igniting, which will be breaking the speakers with interaction. So it is completely necessary to have this blocking fire so we're not igniting. And then we're filling the rest of them with just Grand Spectrums for a ton of crit multi. It's one of the best ways to get crit multi on minions build. It's just a no-brainer here for the damage. That is all of the gear. Let me quickly go over all of the gem setups for this particular build. Now, first, it's just going to be a quick in the helmet raised zombie. This serves as like a nice meat shield, like they're all around you. They also are proccing Feeding Frenzy for the other minions, which is really nice, so that, you know, if the zombies are hitting stuff, it's getting you Feeding Frenzy, which is giving more damage to all of your other minions. And you're not using a low damage socket on your main clear links. The gloves are putting in Phase Run, Desecrate, and a level 1 Precision. As for the Ascendancy here, we are taking Commander of Darkness just for the Ellie res, basically, and the 30% increased damage, of course, is nice. And the Orobot, I think we have dropped Precision because I don't think we need the crit chance. And so just running a level 1 Precision just kind of gives us that 3% attack and cast speed. It's super easy to throw in on here because we have extra green sockets from the Triad's grip. We have some utility here, basically your defensive skills. It's going to be Vol Discipline, Vol Molten Shell, so that we can snapshot the armor from the Orobot. And then we also have Rallying Cry, which is going to apply the bow fizz damage of Lion Eyes to all of your minions, which is super strong. We are going to be adding Call to Arms support here, but it is currently not updated in POB. So just know that you're going to be adding the new Call to Arms support here so that you can automate it, and it's going to be proccing automatically. We do have an Assassin's Mark on our Culling Strike character, and this is a no curse effect Assassin's Mark, but I have put it here on this carry just to simulate the damage with it up on a rare. Additionally, once again, I have 2 setups, one for single target, which is weapon set 2, and one for clear links, which is weapon set 1. As you can see, the disparity between the two is going to be about 8 billion for the clear setup, and the single target focus setup is about 13 billion. Now, this is what the clear links look like, and essentially you're just basically putting in GMP and return in exchange for 2 DPS links. So GMP return is going to be super nice for the clear, and that means you kind of need a source of pierce, and the best way to get that is just going to be a quiver implicit here on weapon set 1. I think if you just get the exact same quiver with some flat fizz, attack speed, multi, and crafted frenzy charge. It's going to be the best way. And it does feel quite good when you have these one pierce. It just makes it so the mobs that are getting hit that extra time from the return. It definitely feels really good. And so that is the AoE setup here, is GMP return. As for the single target setup that's in the other bow, you drop GMP return and you're using just full DPS links, and it's LE damage with attacks and increased crit damage, which you're socketing in here. One thing to mention here is fresh meat, and I think fresh meat is honestly perhaps the best skill gem in the entire game. If you just read this gem is just crazy, right? You summon a minion and it's 4 base crit chance, 70 crit multi, 20 crit chance, and then on top of all of that, it gets adrenaline after you summon it. It's one skill. It's just crazy. Like, everything about this is crazy. So because they get adrenaline based off of their max duration, it does help to invest a little bit into minion duration or skill effect duration, which we have done on the tree here. On the Strangle Grasp, we've actually anointed the duration down here for potency of will. And if you perhaps had a 4 notable Slumlord here, or even a 3 notable perhaps, you can choose to anoint an extra 25% duration and give your minions that extra little bit of duration of adrenaline. That is definitely something you can anoint down here. The skill gems for the bombarding clones is going to be the exact same. Volatility with Perkle's Toe on a support is just going to go crazy here. Fresh meat, of course, one of the best skill gems in the game. And then you just have Awakened Minion. It's just the best gem. Crit damage, it's just the best gem. LE damage, it's just the best gem. Not much to talk about here. And then as for the unsets, we have Purity of Elements just to give ourselves more res. Res capping is kind of hard on this build because we don't have a ton of rares, so the purity definitely helps. And then Spirit Offering for that big crit chance, crit multi buff. It's definitely going to be a really crazy amount of damage. And with the clear setup, this is kind of what it's going to look like. I just have level 1 gems in here, but you can clearly see like the GMP return is going to go pretty good. When you get the Dying Sun up and you get the higher projectiles on the GMP, it's just going to fill the screen with arrows. It is quite good. Now, after going through all that gear, it's still not be very clear why this build does so much fucking damage. And honestly, when I was POBing this at first, I kind of like wasn't really understanding why this was pushing such high numbers compared to literally every other build that I've ever made. If you're curious, like some min-maxed Penance Brand of Dissipation setups typically top out at around 7, maybe 8 billion until you get going with some like really crazy gear with pseudo links and stuff like that. And also for reference, our old Hydra setup that was from last league is doing maybe around 1.4, maybe 1.5 billion DPS. This is literally 10xing that damage. So why does this build do so much damage? And the first reason is honestly going to be Far Shot. Far Shot is just crazy as a more multiplier, and when you actually are accounting for the mobs being far away from you, the more multiplier it adds is just insane. That is one thing that definitely contributes to the damage. Additionally, BAMA is just a really crazy skill. Like, it was added last league, and it is a skill that's been picked up on a few people's radar, and it even was on a few people's nerf list. And right now, it's kind of just like the minion that sucks the least. And actually, it might even veer into the territory of being better than spells. That's just how good the skill is mechanically. The reason for that is you get a little bit of double dipping in that the minion itself can obtain your bow and quiver, and you can still have stats on the bow and quiver. And that allows you to do stuff like with Rallying Cry to apply it to all of your allies. And the bow has quite a lot of fizz damage on it already. So you are applying that large fizz damage via Rallying Cry to your minions. It scales very well with attack speed. It scales very well with hatred because it is a fizz skill that's being converted to cold via Cryad's grip. So it has kind of like all of the things going for it that it needs to. Additionally, I've always been a huge fan of Rain of Arrows mechanically. Rain of Arrows makes it so you don't have to invest as much into chain or pierce or fork because it does have a significant amount of overlaps from just using the base skill. And that makes it so you can invest in a ton of more multipliers, whereas if you're using some other bow skills, it's going to be more like investing into GMP, chain, fork, return, and that kind of thing. Rain of Arrows is very strong mechanically in that basically you're getting 3 arrow hits on average-ish per cast of the Rain of Arrows. And I've simulated this here in the config to have 200% more damage because currently the calcs are only calculating the damage of 1 arrow. And typically mobs are hit by 3. You can test this in PvP, which we did, and we basically were poisoning each other in PvP to like see how many times we were getting hit by with the clone. And essentially TLDR, the number is about 3. So you're getting like triple effectiveness out of each arrow if it's a single target situation. Additionally, abusing the weapon swap is really massive here because you can have the flexibility of a clear link setup on one Lion Eyes, and then you swap to a DPS setup on another Lion Eyes, and that just pushes it over the edge, right? Going from 8 billion to 13 13 billion just by swapping 2 gem links is astronomical. Additionally, the one last thing that's really OP here is typically charges are extremely hard to get on minions. Frenzy and power charges are typically extremely hard to get, and because the minions inherit your quiver, you can give them frenzy charges on crit, which is very, very, very powerful. As you can see, simply unticking frenzy charges here brings me from 13 billion down to 11 billion. It is also a significant portion of the damage. And normally you can't use the Spectre monkeys to give frenzy charges because giving frenzy charges would mean that the altars would give you minus global defenses, which means that the maps are going to be unrunnable, or at least at the very least, the altars are unclickable, which is bad. And so being able to give frenzy charges through the quiver is another mechanical advantage to BAMA that it has over other minion skills. And then lastly, we're getting power charges through the gorillas. Power charge gorillas are completely fine to give the whole party because the negative altar downside is actually crit multi, which we don't care about because it's minion crit multi, right? That's the stat that we care about. So it ticks all the boxes that you need. But yeah, this is going to be the build that we're playing on the 324 Necropolis expansion. I think the damage is super overkill, and I don't think the level of tankiness that the mobs had in Affliction is going to come close to the stuff in Necropolis, but we'll see. But anyways, damage is damage, and we like that. We might cut some of this damage here to, you know, grab some more energy shield, that kind of thing, because this is way, way, way more damage than anything we've ever POB'd in the past. And the only other build that we've ever made that come close to this POB DPS we've had in the past is going to be Vol Blade Vortex. Vol Blade Vortex was sitting at the realm of peak theoretical DPS at around 20 billion, but that was assuming you were getting enough souls to be able to cast that much. So the real DPS probably was a lot lower. But yeah, I will have videos coming out with all the other builds and all the adjustments we're making with the patch in a separate video, but I wanted to go over specifically the carry build here, as it's kind of one of the new innovations we've had in the 324 expansion. If you have any questions regarding the build, you can always feel free to leave in the comments. I try to answer as many people as I can. And yeah, once again, I'm Snap, and thanks for watching.